they've updated Screencastify, and so I noticed earlier that that was a different lead-in. So hopefully this isn't too loud for the people outside either. Good afternoon and welcome to the Writing Lab for English 10. And I am joined online by James and Taylor. Hey, that's funny. James, Taylor, never mind. Also in live, I'm here with Audrey and Julian. And so we'll be looking at the poetry that the poetry devices actually, and how they're going to be used in the writing that is assigned for this. Now, you've already written a poem. That was one of the tasks that you needed to do. With the exception of James, you were, since you came in kind of later, you got to skip that part. This is not a poem in the traditional sense, because you already wrote that. But you're going to write a prose poem about a person you know. This will also turn out being almost like a narrative essay. Think of a special moment you shared with someone close to you. In order to truly capture that moment accurately for the reader, you will be using the poetic devices described in this module. Hi, Taylor. No, Tara. Okay, go ahead and run and go. Taylor's in the meet, and there's you two I get mixed up all the time, and I apologize to both of you.
Right.
I will have to do that every time. I'm terrible with names that start with the same letters, including in my own family. I have a nephew Matthew, a nephew Moses, and they're like hey you. Okay, you're going to have a little model to look at. In fact, we can go ahead and look at this right now. If you have your textbook, go ahead and open them to page 540. Now, this is a very long, detailed assignment. And if you go by the letter of the assignment in the book, you'll get a very good grade. But I want to tell you that this is kind of like the very highest high jump you can do. This is like the very ceiling. What you're trying to do is capture a snapshot, a memorable moment, and be able to describe it in such a way that your reader is going to be able to be in that moment with you. And we do that using the very devices that we've studied for this module. So when you're writing a prose poem, the reason it's called prose is because it doesn't appear in stanzas or lines or anything. It looks like prose, which is paragraphing lines, that kind of thing. But the difference is you're going to use the poetic devices to help us understand this moment and this person. If you look at page 543, this is the model that your textbook gives you. And again, this is like way up in the stratosphere. It's not going to need to be this long. And actually, if the student who wrote this was in my class, I would probably say, it's okay to edit it down, but I'd also like you to add a few more of the devices. Let's read this. Samir of the Kingdom of Jordan. Last summer, my father's brother Samir immigrated to the United States. Samir had lived his whole life in Amman, Jordan, and had spent his last 11 years there practicing dentistry. Because my father had immigrated to America before I was born, I had never met my uncle before. He is currently living in our house while he was looking for a place of his own. Getting to know him, I have found that from top to bottom, Uncle Samir is all pride and respect. Uncle Samir is 45 years old with a mass of tangled dark brown hair with some gray that looks more like a bird's nest than a head of hair. He told me one morning, "This hair is impossible. The harder I try to tame it, the worse it fights back." I think he is proud that his hair has as much spirit as he does. His eyes really seem to smile. They are shockingly blue, deeper than any eyes I have ever seen. They are certainly unique for our family, who all have brown eyes. When Uncle Samir speaks to you, He always looks you in the eye, which makes you feel that what you have to say is very important to him and draws your respect, too. Since Uncle Samir came to stay, I've rarely seen him without a smile beneath his well-groomed mustache. He often emphasizes what he says with sweeping flourishes of his graceful hands. He is in the shower, or when he is cooking, you can hear Uncle Samir singing in Arabic with a voice like a great opera star, low, loud, and clear. I do not always know what he is singing about, but his voice is emotionally stirring. My uncle stands tall and walks with a confident stride. He is more physically fit than my father, who is actually the younger of the two brothers. He says that physical fitness is the fastest way to mental fitness. My father and he work out regularly at the community center, or as Uncle Samir says, I work out, your father tries to catch up. It's harder for me to imagine my uncle at the community center because I've never seen Uncle Samir dressed in a t-shirt and shorts or even blue jeans. Each morning when I wake up, he is already wearing freshly pressed clothing. His slacks always have a sharp crease, and he is never without his tie, even at the dinner table, which is unusual for my family. Though immaculate looking, his clothes do always smell like a dentist's office. I guess that's just one of the downsides to being a dentist. When your eyes travel down Uncle Samir from head to toe, the journey ends with his shoes, shining with a clean, dark black radiance. He takes great care each day that those shoes are shiny enough he can see himself in them. Those shiny shoes are the ultimate contrast to his hurricane of hair. If I could describe my uncle in two words, they would be proud and respectful. I have only known him for a short time, but in that time I've come to truly admire him. You can sense that Uncle Samir is a quality person by the way he stands, walks, dresses, and talks. He has pride in who he is, where he's come from, and where he's going in life. I hope some of that will rub off on me as we get to know each other better in the future. Okay, so what stands out to you about this? Can you see where the poetic devices are in this? On page 543. Maybe if we start with um, imagery. Can you see any examples of imagery in this? Mm-hmm. Now, is that image? Well, yes, it's imagery and it's another thing at the same time. What also is it? It's like a bird's nest. Similar. Here's how you remember them. Like or as the same, similar. So pick up that S and link the as and the like to similar. Metaphor means you don't have it. Okay, great. Um, are there a couple others that you spotted? And remember, imagery means that you're appealing to all of the senses, not just sight.
At the bottom of 543, it says you can hear Uncle Samir singing in Arabic with a voice like a great opera star.
Awesome. And there's a lot more examples that come through that. So what I want to do is review each of the concepts and take a look at them in some other poems And then we'll figure out how we incorporate this into a prose form so that you actually do have a prose poem. So, like I said, the imagery involves the five senses. I can never name them all together at once. My mind always drops the fifth one. Is there anybody who can name all five of them together? You already had sound in here. You do the same thing I do. What did you say? Smell. You do the same thing I do. That fifth one always drops. It's like, what did I say? I forgot. So sight, smell, touch, taste, and sound. Okay. Now, what I love about these is, especially when it comes to smell, there are certain things that stick in your mind a lot. Like I could say popcorn right now. Can you smell it? If I said popcorn, can you recollect that smell? Because you've smelled it enough times and it's very strong, it's very potent, especially if you go to a movie theater in the lobby, it's really strong. Now, if I said burnt popcorn, now I'm going in a different direction, but when you are able to trigger these kinds of memories and senses in the reader, it actually makes your reader more, understand more what you're trying to get to. I also love it when they mix the sense and the smell. My favorite line in Ghostbusters is where one of them says, "Listen, do you smell something?" I've always loved that because I love the mixing of the senses. It just takes me to a different place altogether. So if we look at this is a poem called "Who Has Seen the Wind" by Christina Rossetti. Who has seen the wind? Neither I nor you. But when the leaves hang trembling, the wind is passing through. Who has seen the wind? Neither you nor I. But when the trees bow down their heads, the wind is passing by. So what images of the senses do you get from this? What can you see? What can you hear? What can you smell, taste, or touch, or feel? Right. And actually that does two at the same time. Which are the two senses that are triggered with that image? You can see one of them, but you can't see the other one. But what can you do with that other one? Touch it, feel it, right. And that's kind of the whole point of the poem, right? We can't see the wind, but when we see that the leaves are hanging trembling, we know that it's the wind, and we can also feel it. Is there another sight image there? Right. And it's working it the same way, especially if, like that, when it was really windy there a couple times back in December. And I mean, there were trees just kind of bending over. So you can see that, but you can feel it more, right? So that's imagery. Now, the other fun thing is that this one also has a device in it where it's a figurative language device, and it's in those two lines. The leaves hang trembling, and the trees bow down their heads. Do you know what that device is? Figurative language? There you go. Yeah. And that's why, you know, when she's asking who can see the wind, I can't, you can't, but the trees know and the leaves know. And so it's almost like they can see it because she has personified them. Speaking of figurative language, there are some other devices here too that we will look at. Okay, so simile and metaphor, like I said, the like or as is with the first one. Metaphor is just making the comparison without like or as. So it might be the banshee cry of the baby. Banshee is like it's a mythical creature that screams, and so you're comparing the baby's scream to the banshee's scream. That's without using like or as. But if you look back at our Samir, the Uncle Samir piece, can you see any similes or metaphors here? Say what? Yes. So that's the simile. He has a voice like a great opera star. Is there a metaphor here? This is trickier because you can't scan for the word like or as.
I don't know if this is a metaphor, but it says, the shiny sheets are the ultimate contrast to its hurricane of hair.
That's it. Yep. Hurricane of hair. Because you don't have that like or as, comparing its hair to the hurricane. That's perfect. Okay, so those two are pretty easy and pretty standard. You find those in a lot of different places. Allusion, I know that this one is a tricky one, and allusion itself is not so much used in poetry as much as it is in literature. We will be looking at some allusions later on, especially when it comes to the Count of Monte Cristo. But do you remember what an allusion is?
They mention something else or some other words or
Correct.
something that a lot of people know or the audience of the work to know.
That's right. Yes, and so it might be something from the Bible. So the author would expect people to have some acquaintance with the Bible. Or it could be a Shakespeare play, or it could be a philosopher's statement. So they have, and you're going to see quite a few of them in the Count of Monte Cristo because he is supposed to be a Christ-like figure. So we only had the one in the poem of Descartes, and so they're not that frequently used. But if you were to mention, and it can even be a person, so her Beyonce body and her Tina Turner hair, then you'd have to know who those two people are and what they look like. So that's just one of the devices. Now, hyperbole, and I know people like to call it hyperbole. I did for a little while myself, and then I learned how to say it. But hyperbole, do you remember what this is?
It's like, well, I just like to describe it as like being dramatic, like just saying like, oh, like I'm gonna die of thirst, or like I'm dying laughing, or something like that.
Exactly, it's a big over exaggeration. And there is actually one, well, I don't know. You tell me if this is one or not. On page 543, in the first line of the third paragraph, he or she, the author says, they, meaning his eyes, are shockingly blue deeper than any eyes I have ever seen. Would you consider that a hyperbole?
I probably would.
Yeah, I probably would too, because, whether they're deeper than any eyes she's ever seen, I mean, she's making a statement, I haven't seen eyes like this before, and that's probably true, but I would still consider it a hyperbole, yes. How many of you have come across hyperbole in math yet? Not yet? Okay. It'll come. It's basically the one where the 2 points go on forever, running parallel. And that's kind of what hyperbole is. It's like way out there. The possibility is way out there. Okay.
So like hyperbole, do you feel like observational interpretation sometimes?
Yes. Yeah. Because you definitely, I love this person more than anybody else in the world. Which would probably be true, but it still sounds like a hyperbole because you haven't met any other person, every other person. So, yeah, I would definitely say it's up to interpretation. Onomatopoeia. This is the one that you probably learned 6th, 7th, 8th grade and love to say because it has P in it, and it's spelled weird. Do you remember what onomatopoeia is? Right. So bang, meow, woof. All of those are onomatopoeia. Or as I like to, because I can never spell it, I have to call it onomatopoeia. As in Edgar Allan Poe. Personification we talked about, giving those human characteristics to non-living things. I do want to distinguish this from the animals. So your Mickey Mouse, your Garfield, all of your talking animals, that one is called anthropomorphism. So giving human characteristics to animals. It is a different device. If you use it, that's fine. Because at this point, it's not so much naming them as it is using them to write better, to write in a more descriptive way. Now, tone and diction. And during that one, the figurative language tracker, and there were a lot of people who couldn't find tone and diction. And the thing is, every poem has tone and diction. Here's the difference. Tone, we're looking at the single words that seem to develop the environment of the poem. So if I see words like red, angry, dragon, fire, heat, what tone do you think is developing? What's that feeling like? Anger, right. Now, diction is taking those words and manipulating them in a certain way that is unusual to normal everyday speech. I like to think of this as Yoda speak. So, Yoda, train him we will. It's the word order that kind of makes it different. That's why Yoda always sounds like he's talking in a poem, because it's an unnatural word order. And when you're mixing those sensory perceptions, that's another form of diction in that you put two things together. The burning fire of her stare, that's diction, because it's very unusual. So every poem has a tone and a diction. What makes it unique? So let's see if we can, this is a poem. I want you to see what figurative language you can spot, and I'll go ahead and read it because it's tiny no matter how you're looking at it. The Visitor by Rachel Field. Feather-footed and swift as a mouse, an elfin gentleman came to our house, knocked his wee brown knuckles upon our door, bowed till his peaked cap swept the floor. His shiny eyes blinked bright at me as he asked for bread and a sup of tea. "A plenty of honey, please," he said, "for I'm fond of honey on my bread." Cross-legged he sat, with never a word, but the old black kettle sang like a bird. The red geranium burst in bloom with the blaze of firelight in the room. The china rattled on every shelf, and the broom danced merrily all by itself. Then to the pantry, then I ran, oh, quick to the pantry, then I ran, for to serve that elfin gentleman. I brewed him tea, I brought him bread, with clover honey thickly spread. One sip he took, one elfin bite, but his ears they twitched with sheer delight. He smacked his lips, and he smiled at me. "May good luck follow you, child," said he. He circled me round like a gay green flame. Before he was off away he came, leaving me there in the kitchen dim, sighing and staring after him, with the fire low and the tea grown cold, and the moon through the window sharp and old. Only before me, instead of honey, the bread was golden with thick spread money. That's fun. Fun poem. Okay, so figurative language. What can you spot in there from those devices we just talked about? Simile, metaphor, personification, onomatopoeia, any of those. What can you see?
There's a simile, like the very first line, like swift as a mouse.
Swift as a mouse. Now, if we're adding feather-footed to that, what does that? Okay, what do you think that means to you, Taylor? Feather-footed.
Like I don't know how to describe it. Like soft, like footed, like not being like loud, like walking. Like you know how people just like stomp kind of. Like I feel like it's like walking like lightly.
Light, yeah. It's a light kind of bouncy kind of walk. And because the comparison is really foot to feather, this is also a what? The other comparison, not using like or as, is a what?
Oh, metaphor.
Right. So you have both metaphor and simile in the first line. What else do you see? Personification with that broom. Now it's literal in the poem because the inference is that the elfin man is magic and they can do it, but certainly how would a broom even dance? Well, we've seen, you've seen Beauty and the Beast, so you kind of get the idea of it. Definitely personification though. James, we haven't heard from you. Can you find a figurative device in this poem?
Is the bread with golden with thick spread money kind of a metaphor or alliteration maybe?
It's not alliteration. We'll go through those sound devices, but the bread spread with golden with thick spread money, in the interpretation it could be figurative because how would you interpret that figuratively? What is the symbolism there as you're seeing it? The way I see it, maybe this is what you're seeing too. The whole thing is about, if we were to look at the theme of this would be like hospitality. You're showing hospitality. You don't know who this stranger is, this visitor, but you provide him with hospitality, and there was a reward left. So the symbolism of that thick spread money, it can be figurative in that it's the reward of hospitality. Is that what you were kind of aiming towards, James?
Yeah.
Okay. And see, this is the beauty of poetry. You can interpret it any way you want. There will never be a wrong answer. Just as long as you know what the device is and how you're seeing it, and that's how you state it. Here's what I'm seeing in the poem. Then anything you say at that point will be correct. So I love doing the poetry because I love, especially with the creativity that people have and what they bring to the poem. Okay, so since there's a good segue that James brought up the alliteration, the sound devices, this was the one that a lot of people had trouble with. A lot of times when what did you like about the poem? It flows. What does that mean, it flows? It's kind of hard to tell. So one of the possibilities is the fact that if there is a rhyme, that can kind of help it. So this is from Lewis Carroll. He loved rhyming. He also loved making up words. He's kind of like the Dr. Seuss of his day. The first part of The Walrus and the Carpenter starts, the sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd because it was the middle of the night. You hear the rhythm of that? Here's the fun part. It's not the rhyming that's giving it the rhythm. It's the way the words have been chosen in what is emphasized, what is not. Say the word shining. Say the word shining. 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 So you have the emphasis on the first syllable and then it comes down. If you were to say on the sea, say on the sea. On the sea. Da da da. Do you remember the phrase from studying Romeo and Juliet, iambic pentameter? Do you remember that phrase? And it was attributed, so Shakespeare would always write the lines of the important, rich characters in iambic pentameter. Do you remember what the pattern of that was? To be or not to be, that is the question.
It's like, each word will be a pattern of like, this tone go up and down.
Short, long, yeah. Or stress, unstressed stress. That's probably the best way to describe it, unstressed stress. And that unstressed stress, the single one, is called the iamb. There's other ones, like the opposite of that would be a trochee, or goes da-da. That's what you find in The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Once upon a midnight weary, while I pondered weak and weary. So the rhythm is really where the flow lies because of how the words are stressed. Now, one of the things people said was rhymes help the reader anticipate what's coming. Does that make sense? Is that kind of like what you think? What do you think about poems? Do all poems have to rhyme? Do you prefer poems that rhyme? Tara says no. You prefer poems that rhyme. Julian, you care one way or the other? No. I think it really all depends on the poet's feeling at the time. There are enough people out there where I think this is almost like an OCD thing. Poems have to rhyme. There has to be balance. But there are other people, let me go one more here. Maya Angelou, now here's one by Maya Angelou called Waking in New York. And she read a lot of her stuff. She passed away last year, but she's written so many wonderful things, poetry being one of the best things. Her tone and her rhythm always basically sounds the same. Curtains forcing their will against the wind, children sleep, exchanging dreams with seraphims. The city drags itself awake on subway straps, and I, an alarm, awake as a rumor of war lies stretching into dawn, unasked and unheeded. If you compare that with the poem that rhymes, can you figure out how rhyme affects poems? Energy. That's good. What does it do to the energy?
Harsher sounds and harsher rhythms.
Yes. Right. Because the poet's using more of those and is relying less on the rhyme, that's what's going to give it part of its drive.
And rhyme can sound polished, so a lot of people attribute that to rhyme to a lot of them.
Right. Dr. Seuss especially, right? Now, so here are the different sound devices, and the whole thing is basically flow, and the whole thing is basically tone. The trick is learning how these devices work in the poems. So the rhyme we obviously know are the ends of words, usually at the last line, at the end of the line. The rhythm is the stressed and unstressed. That's where your flow comes from. It's these three that you need to become acquainted with. So alliteration, that one, I think you guys have seen alliteration before. How long have you known about alliteration? Wait, I should probably ask, were you familiar with alliteration before you encountered it in the module? No, okay. Alliteration is it's tongue twisters. The first time you were introduced to alliteration was your first tongue twister. She sells seashells by the seashore. And even that has more than just alliteration in it. So it's the same sound, and they can either be a vowel or a consonant at the beginning. My favorite Dr. Seuss book, speaking of him, was the ABC book. All I can remember from it is Aunt Allie's Alligator, A-A-A. I always loved that line. I loved saying it. And it starts with the vowel sound. So consonants is where you have a repetition of consonant sounds anywhere in the word, beginning, middle, or end, throughout a line. And then assonance is using the vowel sounds repeatedly within a poem. I'm going to go back to Awaking in New York. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind is this. Notice I'm saying sounds and not letters. Typically, the letter S makes the sound, but it doesn't always. What sound besides can the letter S make? When it's combined with the H, right? It makes one more. Z sound. So we'd actually call that one is called a voiced fricative. Love fricatives. Fricative is friction. It relates to friction. So when your tongue is buzzing against the roof of your mouth or your teeth, it's called a fricative. Right. So you can have the unvoiced or the voiced. You can feel it that way. Yeah, I taught those ones. Okay. So looking at this, let me read this again, and I want you to listen for specific sounds, either vowel or consonant, alliteration, or even repetition. What sounds are you hearing in this? Curtains forcing their will against the wind, children sleep, exchanging dreams with seraphim. The city drags itself away on subway straps, and I, an alarm, awake as a rumor of war lies stretching into dawn, unasked and unheeded. So what sounds are you hearing repeated? Day. Oh, there we go. Okay. So you should have the presentation we sent you last night. Just go ahead and bring that up. And we have also been in our textbook on page 543. Okay. Sounds you noticed. A lot of them. Will, wind, with, wake. Way, right, so way. Okay. What now? Okay, so wah, wah, wah. What feeling are you getting? Strong, okay. Positive, negative? Negative. Does it remind you of anything? Wah, wah, wah.
Just like negative energy in general comments.
Now combine this with the content of the poem with what the words are saying. What's going on in the poem? Look at the title.
The people that are waking up.
Yeah, just waking up. How many of you had to wake up to an alarm this morning? Okay. Did you just all of a sudden that alarm went on and you off and you went, hey, welcome to a new day? No, me neither. It's kind of like, in fact, this morning it was, well, at least it's Friday, and then I said, you idiot, it's Thursday. It's a struggle. Reminds me of a struggle. Ugh. Ugh. Like if you're trying to pull a rock up a hill. So the combination of the W sounds along with the content is creating this kind of environment where this person has to wake up and doesn't really want to, especially in New York, where the I, an alarm, awake as a rumor of war, lies stretching into dawn. What does that kind of, now that's figurative. In fact, we know the device is what? Awake as a rumor of war.
It's a symbol that has eyes.
Right. And so comparing the person waking up as a rumor of war. And here's where we've got the diction, because what does that mean, rumor of war, within the context of this poem? That's a really good way of interpreting it, yes. Yep. This is a fight to get through, because all I want to do is stay in bed and sleep. So it's kind of like a war. Okay, so the W sound repeated both at the beginning and in the middle, not necessarily at the end. Dawn, I'm not sure if dawn really has it. It could. I don't know. But certainly since it's at the beginning and the middle, that's called what? Go back. Right. If we had just will, wind, and war, it would be alliteration. But if we're throwing in awake and awake again, then it's going to be what? Because it's both at the beginning and in the middle. Consonant. Yes. That one is consonant. Can you hear any repeated vowel sounds? Where else is it besides there and that? Okay, you're telling me the letter then and not the sound. Okay. What is the sound in will, wind, with, and city? What is that sound? The vowel sound. Okay. Okay, we know that the vowel in will and wind and with is I. Is it a long vowel or a short vowel? Short, because it doesn't have the silent E at the end, right? Okay, so what's the short I sound? What sound is the short I? It. Right, there you go. Eh. Also kind of sounds like you're struggling, doesn't it? You also have, and you could do another one. In fact, this one is fairly common with the A, an alarm, awake, against. There's a sound called schwa. My favorite, there was always a t-shirt, I saw this t-shirt and I wanted it made up. If you looked in the dictionary for pronunciation, you might see an upside down E. That's called a schwa. The schwa is the center of our language center in English. So, you go to the doctor tells you to open your mouth, stick out your tongue and say what? That's the center of it. So it's always the vowel sound, and it's made by every letter. So if you have a two-syllable word, say like, let's go with awake. Okay, awake. What is that stress called again? Short to long stress. Da-da. I am, right? I am. So the iambic means it's five together when it's the pentameter. So awake, when you have a short or an unstressed with the stress, the unstressed is always Doesn't matter what letter it's in. The difference is there, like rumor, if there's an R in it, the R controls the vowel sound. So we're getting into a whole bunch of stuff you don't need to know about, so I'm sorry. I digress. Okay, so repetition. Is there any repetition in this? Not much. There is some. There's one word repeated 2 times. Awake. And if you want to count the title, sort of 3. So repetition always is there to reinforce the theme of the poem. Okay, so looking at your model, why did I say 459? That's not 459. Look in your textbook on page 543. I can't believe I did that. Must be from the freshman. Okay. Like I said, this is the top. If you made this any longer, I would still read it. But if it gets to be about 90 pages, I probably won't read all of it. Just to let you know. This also is a lot more than I would expect. But it all depends on the person you're describing and the event you're describing. Your textbook goes into specific detail with the controlling impression, and that's basically their way of saying the thesis statement. This person decided to organize the thoughts. How have they organized this description? Look back at basically the thesis on 543. where can you find the thesis in this essay, writing, narrative? Where is it usually? The first sentence? Right. But where is it usually? Yeah. Well, the topic sentence and the thesis are actually different. Topic sentences are for your body paragraphs. Yeah, it's the thesis is usually at the end of the intro. So if we look at the end of the intro, getting to know him, I have found that from top to bottom, Uncle Samir is all pride and respect. And if you look at the rest of the writing, this person has started with the hair and moved down to the shoes, I think it is, or the shoes that you can see your reflection in. You don't have to pick the same organization. And since this is kind of like an event, since I'm saying that, the events are easier because there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. You just have to kind of figure out where those points are in this. Narrative essays, very simple to write. Hopefully you wrote at least one or two of them previously. You all had an experience writing a narrative? Yes, we have. We did do that. And this way you get to be a little bit more creative too. It's one of the few creative writing prompts that we have. So really all you need, the title, I do encourage people to use titles because it reinforces the major claim or the thesis or whatever you're writing. It gives like the Awaking in New York title. We know what the poem's about. Tell your reader what you're writing about. So it could be, Great Grandma Josephine or whatever. Then you have your introduction. The controlling event is just saying, here's the person and here's the event basically, but you can do it in a more creative way. And then beginning, middle, end, and conclusion. So at the, depending on your event, 5 paragraphs roughly, but it's not your standard, 5 paragraphs like you write in a formula. It's just beginning, middle, and end. And then your conclusion. And notice how this person concluded. I hope some of that will rub off on me as we get to know each other better in the future. So it's just kind of like, where do we go from here? That line is where do we go from here? Okay. Reminder. Oh, wait. Okay. This is a sample prose poem. Now, it's not quite about an event, but I love this poem because it does tell a story. The morning coffee. I'm not sure why I drink it. Maybe it's the ritual of the cup, the spoon, the hot water, the milk, and the little heap of brown grit, the way they come together to form a nail I can hang the day on. It's something to do between being asleep and being awake. Surely there's something better to do, though, than to drink a cup of instant coffee. To just meditate? About what? About having a cup of coffee. A cup of coffee whose first drink is too hot and whose last drink is too cool, but whose many in-between drinks are, like Baby Bear's porridge, just right. Papa Bear looks disgruntled. He removes his spectacles and swivels his eyes onto the cup that sits before Baby Bear, and then, after a discreet cough, reaches over and picks it up. Baby Bear doesn't understand this disruption of the morning routine. Papa Bear brings the cup close to his face and peers at it intently. The cup shatters in his paw, explodes actually, sending fragments and brown liquid all over the room. In a way, it's good that Mama Bear isn't there. Better that she rests in her grave beyond the garden, unaware of what has happened to the world. What's the story? I will tell you that almost the entire plot is in the last sentence. Mm-hmm. 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 Yep. That was the nail then, right? Yep. Beautiful. That's it. See how much of a story you can tell in just one sentence? So if you wrote something this short and could tell the same quality story, it'd be great. So this is another example. What are some of the devices that this poet used? Try this. What are the pieces that make it like a poem?
It seems like they put a lot of emphasis on how the cup exploded.
Right. And so we can actually see it, right? We could probably hear it. We might even be able to feel it. And if the coffee's strong enough, we could even smell it. So James, what is that called? What's that device? One that uses all the senses. Anybody help them? Say louder. Go ahead. Go ahead, James. You probably weren't able to hear what Dane said. Dane, what did you say? Did you hear him? I don't think you heard. Imagery?
Yeah, imagery, I believe.
Yeah, imagery. So, a lot of good imagery, very specific imagery. There's a couple other devices here too. Like when you said, Tara, the nail, that's the nail I can hang the day on. Metaphor. Very good. And here's the $10,000 question. Baby bear and Papa bear and Mama bear, what was the device? I'll take that. I will take that. Definitely, because you all have to be familiar with the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears in order to have that. There's also thinking anthropomorphism, but I think you did a great job. Uh-huh. Yes. Yes. Because the family now is broken up. Mm-hmm. And I think, too, it kind of speaks to us about the age of the child. So I think that identifies the child as someone who would be listening to nighttime bedstories. And so to have the mother gone at that point is tragic. So I really like this one. I think there's a lot of good stuff happening in it, and this is also something you can strive for. You also had, as a prose poem, The Storm in the Mountains, and I don't quite remember what page that was on. You may need to go back and look at that again. But A Storm in the Mountains is also another prose poem. It doesn't capture an event in terms of, like something happened with somebody. But that's the kind of length and the kind of model you want to look at. Okay, so remember, this is a prose poem, so you're not going to use any stanzas, lines, rhymes. This is a narrative essay of an event with someone special. Another thing I want to emphasize that it should be a person you have personal contact with. There were a few people in the past who have written about, well, I know about Dwayne Johnson or I know about Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'm going to write about them. No, you're not, because you don't know them, and you usually go to Wikipedia to find out about them. So I don't want any of that. It needs to have a mixture of the poetic devices. So I should see some imagery, I should see some figurative language, and experiment with the language. Use some Yoda speak or use some special diction, and if you can even throw in some alliteration here or there to make the mood the way you want it. Okay? So this is just kind of practicing using those. So here's the due date. This is so that you can avoid point deductions, and so it's another reason why if you have not yet gotten to 1.6.1 or 1.7.1, then use that Google Doc with Writing Lab to get there so that you can actually get to this assignment. It's technically due tomorrow, but I always give you the weekend because it's due on a Friday, and I want to make sure that if you want to work on the weekend, you have that option. Peer reviews will be assigned at midnight, so that's the very next moment. So it's got to be in by 11:59, or it will not be assigned a peer review. If it doesn't get assigned a peer review, you have to review your own, which is somewhat okay, but it's always, this is how I measure your listening and speaking skills. That's part of the standards and skills I need to see, and they do relate directly to how you're responding to somebody else. Then the peer reviews are due, and I put this on here especially because Julian is very persnickety when it comes to when he wants his peer review when he finishes his. So they will be turned in no later than 11:59. If it's not in by midnight on Monday, just go with your own, okay, Julie? I don't mean to tease you. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So this is tricky for the new people. It's how to find the peer review. And if you go to, if you ever get stuck, now you're going to get the instructions in the slides presentation, but the other place that you can find, where's my peer review? As soon as this comes up, running slow today. There we go. I updated my, the computer updated this running slow. You go to course resources, it will take you to this page, and this is where you can actually find, by the way, I had added this night, it was part of my message last night. If you are wanting GATE credit, this can be actually open to anybody. If you click on this star, it will give you information on how you can get that. But you also have this group of buttons here that give you information, and here's your peer review. So you have the instructions here as well, and I think I forgot to link it in the lesson, so I'm going to go ahead and do that later on today. But this will tell you exactly what I'm about to tell you. You know how when you submit an assignment and it tells you, you get that little pop-up box that says success, you successfully submitted at such and such a time. That's where you find the next day, after that midnight, you will see somebody's name hyperlinked there. When you click on it, it will open the document in what's called SpeedGrader. And your SpeedGrader looks different from my SpeedGrader. Where is my SpeedGrader? This is not an assignment, so it's not going to send you that. Oh, because I'm on a page, that's why. There we go. So, I want to make sure somebody may have turned this in early, and so if they did, it might accidentally pop up. So you go back to 1.7.1. You will find it basically here Mine looks different from yours. But when you click on the name, it's going to take you to a screen more or less that looks like this. Am I in the wrong spot? Why is it? There are 2 active students. What are you talking about? Maybe I'm in the wrong one. Oh, I know what's happened. That link is bad. Shucks. Okay. I'm going to have to do some other fixing too. Whenever you get to a page and it comes up saying access denied, if you click on one of those and it says access denied, that means I've got the wrong page up. Every one of these has to be copied and pasted for a new course. So please tell me as soon as possible, because I never know they're dead unless somebody tells me. In fact, I think Julian was one of my, last year, he kept me on my toes telling me, hey, this doesn't work. Hey, this doesn't work. Okay, so yours will be up in here, and then when you click on, this will actually be a student's name. And then it will take you to a screen that's more or less like this. And what you want to do is go back to, so this is now open. And then you're going to create a copy of this person's essay, because what you're going to do is you're going to mark on it. So you download the file. It will allow you to download it. It will only show up, it might come out as a Word doc. And if it does and you don't have Microsoft Word on your computer, all you have to do is take the file and drag it into your Google Drive. And then that will automatically convert it to a Google Doc, which this is not. I'd have to do that myself. But what I can show you is that, let me just open this one here. So you want to make a copy, so you're going to go to File, Make a Copy, and instead of calling it Copy of so-and, whatever the title is, so you will say, and I'm not actually going to save this because I don't want it to change, but peer review for and then whoever it is. You want to make sure that you put it in your English folder, or wherever that is. And then you also want to do this, canceling it for now. When you come up to you're going to get your own copy in editing mode, right? When you share it, you need to get the shareable link, but you have to give them editing privileges, because that's the only way that your comments are going to appear. Okay? So once you do that, this now becomes the URL that you can, first of all, you can upload the assignment to 1.7.2, and then you go back to the assignment. Come on. And paste the URL and assignment comment. Is that kind of what it looks like when you guys see it on your end? Or is it different? Pretty different? But, okay, so the assignment comment, though, is in the same spot? Okay. That's the only one you really need to look for, is that assignment comment. Do you guys get the tools up here? So it is possible for you to do all the bracketing and everything without having to make the copy of the... You've never tried it? Try it. Let's experiment. And let's...
I've tried it before. It does work.
It does work. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I've read it.
Okay, okay. See, I could look at yours. We've made a student named Zizzer Zuz, again from Dr. Seuss. The problem is I have somehow become attached to Zizzer so that I get every single piece of email he gets. And so our teachers have put him in the class, and so finally I've just had to separate myself from him, give him up for adoption. So I don't, so you can tools up here, according to the instructions that are on the slideshow, page 545. So everybody look at 545 in your textbook. Okay. There are 6 questions there with the tips. So the tool should allow you to do what is under the tips. Bracket the sentence in the introduction that expresses thoughts and feelings on the subject. It's basically identifying what's the person's major claim or theme or thesis. Number the details, and then label the sensory details. You might want to highlight. You could do a highlight like you did with the sound devices. Just make sure that you give the person a code. Yellow is sight, pink is sound, that kind of thing. Cross out details that don't relate. That you may not need to do as much of. So if you go through and follow those steps, and then I don't think the revision techniques are for the writer, not for the peer reviewer. Okay, so just worry about the middle part. I have seen people, the freshmen did something similar. They answered all of the questions in a Google Doc and kind of pointed all of that out. That's acceptable. I'll accept that too if that's easier for you. Okay? Questions about that? Okay. Here's how you submit the peer review. So you've got the Google Doc. Now, if it does, so Taylor said those tools work. So Taylor, all you had to do, did you have to create a Google Doc with the answers separately so that you could send them in the peer review in your assignment?
I did try, I just tried to do it once, and I noticed that it did work, but I'm personally more comfortable with creating a Google Doc and, writing the questions that way. But I know that, doing the whole highlighting and, all that stuff, it does work.
Yeah, and I've noticed, too, that when I go to, because I have 2 screens that I look at, and so when I'm grading peer reviews, I always bring up the writing assignment on one screen and then the peer reviews on the other. So I can always see, are your comments there? So if you decide that you're just going to use the editing tools in SpeedGrader or whatever yours is called, go ahead and then just submit for your peer review 1.7.2, say peer-reviewed Julia Mosley's paper, or whoever you've got. Okay. Make sure to get the shareable link and then paste that link in the add comment. And then also, if it's a separate document, make sure that you submit it as a peer review in 1.7.2. You have these instructions with you. You've got this whole presentation, so make sure to have it open when you're getting ready to do all of this. I know this is a lot of information, and chances are your brain is now full. Is there anybody, though, that has a burning question that they need to ask?
I do.
Go ahead, Taylor.
How many sentences are you expecting in each of the paragraphs?
Well, I gave you some models. Based on those models, what are you thinking here?
Like a normal paragraph,
could be. I am looking more for the devices.
Right.
The whole purpose of this is, can you use poetic devices in your writing to make things more descriptive? That's the purpose of why we want this to be a narrative, for one thing, because if you use these same techniques in academic writing, there's a slight difference between cliche and poetic devices, but these poetic devices actually make your words stronger. So I'm looking more for a mixture of how you use these, how vivid your description is, based on not just what's seen, but also what's felt. What mood can you put in this? So it's using words to make expression beyond the connotative meanings, or the denotative meanings, the ones that would come in from dictionaries. I know that doesn't quite answer your question, Taylor, but when that, like I said, that drinking coffee poem, prose poem, if it's that short, and you notice it's only one paragraph.
Yeah.
And if you look at, does somebody remember where Storm in the Mountains is?
I don't know.
If you look at that, even that can be used as a guide. So, let's see. I wonder if I think. No, it's one of the first ones. There we are. 459. 459. So the first paragraph is only 2 or 3, but then you've got a rather large chunk in the second paragraph, but then there's a smaller one. So you see that with this, because it's more creative in nature, there's no formula to it.
Okay.
I can give you an arbitrary number if you need one. Let's say
no,
97.
What you're saying is just like as many as you need to like get the whole like sound of the point.
Correct. Yeah. This is a creative writing assignment. This is not academic in nature. It's not expository or persuasive. So you get to make some of your own rules with it.
Yeah.
Okay. A sampling. Okay. So, and when I mean that, I mean by category, not by individual devices. So figurative language, there's all kinds of them. Just use 1 or 2 if you want.
Okay.
You may be stronger in the imagery. It may be stronger in, you may have a wonderful, rich vocabulary and can get the diction and tone down. And then just have a couple of the others. But I would like to see a sampling of the 3 categories. Okay. Anything else? Well, this went really well. I want to thank you all for your participation. And if you do have questions, please send them my way. And thank you for joining us. And good luck. Bye, Taylor. Bye, James.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. And then